Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, why are MCPS test scores continuing to fall? And why is Governor O'Malley opposed to allowing border babies into Maryland? There is a crisis in Ukraine, Iraq, Afghanistan, now in Israel. So how safe is our world, and what is the biggest threat to the United States? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by education activist Cynthia Rubenstein, Republican National Committee woman Nicolee Ambrose, and Democratic activist Sam Statland. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. A year ago, news reports by community newspaper The Gazette documented how a majority of Montgomery County public school system students were failing subjects like algebra, calculus, and biology. Now this week, The Gazette reported how middle school students are failing reading and math proficiency as they fall across the board. Sam, elementary school students saw their math proficiency drop 8.6%, and there was a 4.6% drop for middle school kids. Are MCPS officials being truthful when they say the drop is a result of the new curriculum?
Well, Casey, everybody has their own truth. And MCPS has a lot of truths that they must put up with. So if the finite answer is yes, it's a new curriculum and it didn't match up to the test scores. Therefore, they're correct in saying that. However, I say that if a child has a good basic education, they shouldn't have to worry about failing the test anyway because they'd learn the material to begin with. Now, that's a truth. But the other part of the truth that a lot of people don't know is that the math test also includes writing. You have to be able to be proficient in English, and you have to understand the question and put up a good answer. So, from that point of view, they're wrong because the children who are taking the test may be proficient in math and not proficient in English.
From time immemorial, students have had word problems as part of their math questions and answers. This isn't a new phenomenon. These students aren't being taught the right stuff. They should be, the standards aren't being enforced hard enough.
Casey, X plus Y equals 2. Would you please state that formula and how it works?
Sam, it's my show. You don't ask the questions. I do. Now we're going to Cynthia. Cynthia, let's talk about this reading issue. While you might be able to blame the change on the Common Core for the drop in math, why in the world would there be a drop in reading proficiency? Because either you can read and comprehend or you can't. There's not much in between there.
The problem is not the new Common Core curriculum, it's the old test. Teachers used to teach children how to take the test. They used to prepare them for the reading test. They used to prepare them for the math test.
Okay.
It's called, drill and kill.
But they were teaching them, but if they were teaching them to read, they're teaching them to read, and the students should be able to comprehend that.
But the kids who take the reading test for the state have to write what we used to call, what are still called BCRs, brief constructed responses. Teachers aren't teaching brief constructed responses. A lot of the state testing has to do with kids learning how to take that test. And teachers are teaching the new Common Core curriculum, which does not match the old test. They shouldn't have been taking the test this year. It was predictable that the test scores would drop.
And you predicted it last year.
And I predicted it last year because there is a mismatch.
All right. Well,
next year, we'll see.
I want to go to Nicolee because she's dying.
I am dying here. Okay, I have children, elementary school students that just had to suffer under this new disastrous Common Core curriculum. And I also want to get back to your word of basic skills that one would hope elementary school students would learn. I'm going to rattle off a list. 4th grade, there were suddenly no vocabulary, tests, lessons, spelling, nothing. I'm sorry, but it's not acceptable for my son or whomever to have to rely on a smartphone and autocorrect to learn how to spell and construct a sentence. Math. We were not informed as parents of when quizzes would occur, when tests would occur. I used to know exactly what my children's grades would be. I had no idea. I requested 3 different student conferences to try to understand. They did not even have the syllabus prepared, and they were pulling resources from 5 different sources that didn't go together. This is a disaster. I am not surprised by this drop in test scores, and unfortunately, I think most of us now are looking at alternatives, which is shameful. It is completely possible to have a fantastic public education system.
Well, but the question that really concerns all of us is whether Montgomery County students and parents are getting their money's worth for the over $2 billion that we're spending on the school system. That's what we need to address.
Definitely not.
Well, yes, we
quick.
are. It could, and education in Montgomery County could be better, but especially for making sure that we continue narrowing the achievement gap.
Well, I
But
think-
overall, if you look at comparisons statewide and nationwide, yes, they are getting
Sam,
good
wrap it up.
education.
From my point of view, we're too top heavy and money's going towards administration, and we don't filter enough down to the classroom, and we don't put enough into teachers and resources. And I think the worst of what's going on with Mr. Starr was when he's talking about boundaries will not change. We've been changing boundaries for a long, long time.
All right,
to the
Boundaries is tinkering around the edges.
You know,
There's much
Cynthia,
more
we got to go on to our next
that.
topic. We could spend a whole show on boundaries alone.
we could.
All right, for
Parental
years,
involvement.
the governor of Arizona and Texas have been complaining that there's a crisis on their southern border due to an influx of illegal aliens. However, for whatever reasons, the political powers here in Washington paid little attention other than to try to maneuver for political advantage. Nevertheless, like the tsunami that explodes on the beach, seemingly without warning, then grabs everyone's attention, the influx recently of young refugees crossing at will into the United States has suddenly overwhelmed our immigration system. Nicolee, the White House response to this imminent threat is to ask Congress for more money and to try to send all of the aliens to the various states, including Maryland. And our governor says, no mas. We don't want any more illegal immigrants in Maryland. What's the big issue here?
This is just an enormous tragedy. I cannot imagine being a parent in Honduras thinking that my child has a better chance being shipped across Mexico and subjected to child trafficking, sex trafficking, rather than being with me. I mean, that's just incomprehensible. It's a human tragedy of an unimaginable scale. I am all for immigration, but it's got to be legal. And what this demonstrates with people pouring over our border, rather sleeping in prison cells and being subjected to this, is what misguided, disastrous policy can do. By telling people that they can have a free education, we'll treat them better than our own citizens or people from other countries on this planet, it leads to disastrous things, people putting their children at
but they're
risk.
here.
It's
so
really frightening.
What are we supposed to do with them?
Well, I would suggest we passed money for a border fence in the last decade, and as Charles Krautheimer pointed out, the White House seems to have a fence that works really well. So I'd say we should have spent that money that we've been required to spend long ago, and it needs to get built. Secondly, I would definitely say we need to speed up processing these people, but the way you don't process them by shipping them to other states, you process them down there and get them home. And thirdly, I think we need to stop not addressing the problem. And by claiming that all of a sudden gangs have overtaken these countries, this has been a problem for time immemorial. This is not a new problem.
Right.
It is misguided U.S. policy that is drawing people here and putting their lives
But
at
I want
more risk.
to focus. I want to do this with Sam on what's happening here in Maryland. Our own Senator Barbara Mikulski asked this question: what are we going to send them back to? It's not like Juan Valdez is going to greet them at the airport with roses. The dilemma of what to do is very real. These children are already here. So what are we going to? How should we handle this? You know, I was shocked that Governor O'Malley said that he did not want these children up in Westminster.
That's not quite what he said.
What did he say?
What he said is that the environment in Westminster, because of the conservatism of the population, is not exactly the great place to put them, especially when somebody went with spray cans and racially smeared them coming there. The same thing happened.
He was a
out
graduate
in
of MCPS
Eastern
because
Maryland.
I
know
he misspelled illegal.
Illegal. So therefore, He's trying to come up with other locations, working with the federal government, where these children can be brought.
That's a canard.
Now the question is,
That's a canard. He doesn't want them in Maryland because he knows Maryland voters don't want them here.
That's not necessarily true,
No,
Casey.
I think he's sincerely worried about the conditions into which these children would be placed.
Oh,
They've already
please.
suffered enough trauma
Sure.
on the way from Honduras. I want to say
My
one more
gosh.
thing.
Well, let me
No,
ask
you
you a
have to have a
question.
facility that is safe and welcoming for them. And if he judges that Westminster is not a good place, it's not a good place.
You actually believe that? You think that here in America, where we have fantastic law enforcement, people who are liberty-loving people would be a threat to people who claim to be fleeing gang violence?
Yes, look what happened
you're
in
literally-
California
Look,
with the good people of
guys,
that nice California
it's
town.
the governor.
You don't think it has anything to do with Martin O'Malley not wanting to upset his Democratic base in Baltimore City and Prince George's?
What base for what? He's
We
a date-
can't educate our own children, and yet we want to bring in people who aren't even U.S. citizens and give them a better life, but not do that for
governor-
our
All
own
we're talking about
students?
is housing them safely so that they can.
How
they
about
can
the kids
go
in inner
through
city
due
Baltimore
process.
with guns, with bullets flying through the streets? I mean, seriously, we cannot
We're
take
not
care of our
talking-
own kids.
Instead of republicogging, instead of demagoguing, I think what you're doing is a big mistake. You can't confuse all these issues. The issue is we have children. They wound up in Texas. Governor of Texas doesn't want them. He wants them shipped out someplace. The children need to go through a process to be returned home. So what are you going to do and where are you going to house them? That's the point. And if they have to be split to different states, there's nothing wrong
Why
with
is
that.
the answer housing them in the U.S.? They broke our
Well,
laws.
you're right. We could send them to Guantanamo Bay. That would be a great place for them. Why didn't I think
I
of
hear
that?
Cuba is a
Wrong
tropical
party.
airline.
But the question really is, and I think this is the frustration that is on both sides, is that that people who are here illegally are not could be returned to their countries. They don't have to stay. Why do they have to stay in the United States?
Because the law states that they have to go through due process, and there are children who are here who could reasonably expect refugee status based on the conditions that they left.
Oh, come on,
They,
Cynthia.
who are not economic refugees who are fleeing violence.
The number of refugee status that has been granted for Central Americans has been de minimis over the last 10 years.
And may I point out that
there's such a slim number that I mean that's just an argument to delay the processing of these kids and sending them back. We can't. What about all the people who go to the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City or in the capital of Honduras and register to try to become American citizens and want to immigrate to America? Those people are following the rules, and
they may not be
look,
in the same kind of urgent situation that some of these children are who are fleeing recruitment by gangs in
they're
Honduras.
fleeing poverty.
When
they're
your
not
children
fleeing.
And
are
any of them are
threatened,
fleeing gang violence and being recruited and forced to be in gangs in Honduras. Honduras is one of the most violent countries in South America.
if I may point out, you can
Nicolee,
say that.
you got to close. You got 30 seconds.
Thank
Close
you,
it up.
Casey. As I may point out, you can say that about many countries on this planet. I was just talking
But
about
Honduras
Sudan.
is a special
no, you have
case right
people
now.
being jailed and
right.
nearly killed in jail for their
We're not going to
faith.
solve this tonight.
This is a problem with many countries. It is not just that problem.
Okay. We got to go. Sorry. Thank you all. It's passionate. You can see the passion on everybody from everybody tonight. When we come back from this short break, we're going to talk about another passionate subject. How safe is our world, and what is the biggest threat to the United States? Stay tuned. There's rarely a time in the course of human events when the world is totally at peace. We're blessed in the United States to live peacefully with our surrounding countries like Canada and Mexico. Not this immigration matter notwithstanding, we still live in a very peaceful setting. But the whole rest of the world seems to be in turmoil, and the issue of American leadership to address these crises have never been greater. Sam, the entire Middle East is involved in wars of liberation and aggression, and the most pressing problem recently is the Ukrainian downing of an unarmed civilian aircraft suggests that Russia is once again acting like a rogue nation intent on world conquest. So the question is, how safe is our world, and what is the biggest threat to the United States?
Depends upon your point of view. If you're person who believes in global warming. That truly is a tremendous threat. It's a tremendous threat. Down in Key West, we pump water 24/7 to keep flooding out. And throughout Europe, you're building your dikes, and they're larger and larger and larger. War, of course, is always a threat. Terrorism is a huge threat to this country, as we realized from September the 11th. I think one of our biggest threats really is our lack of educating our population, getting back to basics when it comes to civics, when it comes to education, where people need to feel more Americanish so that they appreciate what we have. Why are all these people from all over the world coming here? Because we have freedom, and because for the most part we welcome people in, and because the opportunity for your children to do better than you and your grandchildren to do better than them, this is the best place to be. So I would really like to see a return to some basics where we talk about civics and we get people involved and engaged in the political process, in the education process, where we have more parent involvement. I think these are all important things.
It's a well-reasoned answer, but you avoided the question, which was of the external threats that are facing us today, what is the biggest threat to the United States?
I would say global warming.
Thank you,
And I
Sam.
say that because if you look at the stock market this year, with the planes being shot down, with all the war that's going on, the incursions in the Middle East, what's going on in Africa, people starving, women's rights, children's rights, the stock market is doing very, very well. So obviously, the economic and leaders of this country don't feel very threatened by that.
Well,
Where I think they feel more threatened by global
let's see what the
warming
other panelists
because
have to say.
the cornfields and the rice fields could be underwater.
I got a feeling that Nicolee, who's going to be asked the same question, which is, what do you consider to be the biggest threat?
So I'm going to focus on what I think we can affect, and that is, I would say the greatest danger is a weak United States. I think a strong United States encourages better behavior by all of our fellow nations across the globe. I'm specifically a fan of Ronald Reagan, Peace Through Strength, and Teddy Roosevelt, Walk Softly and Carry a Big Stick. I do not think we would have 2/3 of the problems we have right now on the globe, which directly results in people dying, if we had a administration that people throughout the globe respected right now. Russia would not be in the Ukraine. I think the Middle East would be much calmer. We would not have these problems in Syria. And to get to the horrific Malaysian Airlines downing 30 miles from the Russian border in a town controlled by separatists, it was the third plane they shot down this week. Those 298 people would be alive right now if Russia were not in the Ukraine. There is no way with any other president in the past 30 years, 40 years, that would have happened.
You know, Nicolee, I just got back from Moscow a couple weeks ago, and you know what really, really surprised me?
That the rebel leader in the Ukraine is actually a resident of Moscow?
No,
Just
that
suggesting.
Henry Kissinger
Yes.
is one of Putin's most reliable advisors.
Well,
And
I don't
that
know
was
if
also
it's,
a-
I don't know if
few
it's true. I
problems.
don't know if it's true or not. But
That was in the press,
well,
and I witnessed
let's go to Cynthia, get her opinion, then we'll throw it open for discussion.
Well, as far as immediate threats, you know, some people might say it's what's based in Pakistan and Syria and Boko Haram and, you know, and any ideological terrorist who wants to do the United States harm. Some might say what's rising is cyber terrorism. That's the new frontier. But I think we don't really know what our most imminent threat is because we often don't know what's most threatening to us until something happens.
What about economic
affect
divide,
our-
Well,
social divide?
I'm going to answer my own question, and I think you all have touched on things tonight that are certainly at issue. And I pose the question probably as an external threat to focus on that. But I agree with Sam actually that I think the greatest threat is the internal rot that we're seeing in our society, that where we are less patriotic as a country. I don't think we are as connected as a country with our society and our pieces of government. If any, you know, I look at the statistics from these past elections and the primaries, and I'm disturbed by the fact that there's such little voter turnout. And while we all can disagree as to what the cause is, I believe it's because people are disaffected. I believe they've lost faith in their governments, and I think they've lost faith in their ability to affect change.
I think there's an argument for complacency too. If people think there's not something that's at great risk, then they say, "Oh, fine,
Well,
you know, it's
there
good
has-
enough.
You're absolutely right,
it's good
because
enough, so I don't need
the
to
most
show up. It's just
fundamental
good
rule in
enough."
politics is you vote your pocketbook and you vote those issues that are of concern.
There
But-
has to be a disconnect between sending your children to war in foreign countries to restore democracy. And once we get to the point where we can, their election turnouts are in the 60, 70, 80, 90% range. And we as a nation turn out a 20% vote. Where is that? It's unimaginable
Because
to me.
people don't feel there's so much at stake.
Nicolee.
It's
Well, I want to merge a little of what
Real quick,
both
'cause we only
Sam
have
and
30
Casey
seconds.
said. Yes, obviously America has to be a strong, freedom-loving nation that understands how rare liberty is. And so that is how you have the strength to be strong militaristically or character and morally wise enough to maintain our system of government.
Well,
It's
we're
a
going
republic.
to have to end it there. I think it's one of the imponderables that we can think about during the summertime and try to figure out. Oh, you roll your eyes, but you know when else do we have time to think about big macro issues? Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. I read Playboy. Welcome back for Parting Shots. Now with Parting Shots, Cynthia Rubenstein.
all right. Oh boy, let's recover from that. I want to talk about a Casey, but not Casey Aiken. This week, the County Council appointed Casey Anderson to be Planning Board Chair, which is a very important position in Montgomery County that most Montgomery Countyans don't know anything about. The Planning Board Chair and the Planning Board are responsible for all land use policy in Montgomery County, which undergirds almost everything else in Montgomery County. So he's got a big job ahead, and do well and Godspeed.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sam Statland, your parting shot.
I want to give big kudos to everyone who ran for election here in Montgomery County as a challenger. It took a lot of courage, it took a lot of work, and I really appreciate their effort. Keep trying, guys. You might get elected one day.
Thank you, Sam. Nicolee, Ambrose, your parting shot.
So we just had a primary, and Montgomery County had the lowest turnout of any county in the state. And I would suggest it's hard to get excited when you've only got a one-party Democrat monopoly. We have talked about it on the show with people, even Democrats saying we need a two-party system in Maryland. It will give us balance. It will give us oversight. We've got some great people running. We've got Larry Hogan, our GOP nominee, who is only talking about fiscal issues. We have 47% of Marylanders wanting to leave the state. And it's a gorgeous state. It's just because there aren't jobs here. So please consider Larry Hogan. Please consider Dan Bongino running. So we'll have 2 of 8 seats in Maryland's congressional district. It's a great way for us to get representation, have a voice, and really have your government be more accountable. So please consider that two-party system. Thank you.
Well, that's a wonderful parting shot. Of course, I think what should happen is all Republicans should register as Democrats, so they would have at least a chance to vote. But the most important thing that's going to happen is we've just come from the All-Star break, and the Nationals and the Orioles are both leading their respective divisions. And my fondest wish for the next 80 games is that the Nationals and the Orioles end up in the World Series together and have a inner beltway rivalry up and down I-95 and BW, just because I think it would be so neat and cool. And you know what? They're both really good teams. Great pitching, great hitting, and I just can't stand that chant that they do at Camden Yards. Anyway, thank you, panel. Thank you, audience, for tuning in to Montgomery County's partisan political talk show. And remember to stay tuned, because you can watch us on YouTube, you can like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.